The atmosphere at Abbey Road Studios is tense. The Beatles are trying to create a song that seems like a bridge too far. This isn't just another track. It's a gamble, a musical risk that could either break or remake them. The clock ticks in the background, adding pressure, while the engineers adjust the dials. They've pushed boundaries before, but now they face a moment that may be too big to conquer. What no one anticipated was that this track, seen as impossible by many, would become a defining moment in rock history. Can the Beatles once again redefine music, or has their ambition outstripped their capabilities? By the mid-1960s, the Beatles were no strangers to groundbreaking albums, from Rubber Soul to Revolver. However, with each new album, the expectation was greater. In 1967, with the release of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the band was reaching new heights of musical experimentation. But they weren't just making another pop album. They were attempting to change the fabric of popular music. Their success up until then had given them an almost mythical status, but it also placed immense pressure on them to continue innovating. Every sound, every chord, had to be new and exciting, pushing both musical and cultural boundaries. However, the pressure to create another album that would transcend everything they had done before began to create tension within the band. The members, Paul McCartney, John Lennon, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, were facing not only creative differences, but also personal tensions. Their evolving relationships with each other would play a crucial role in the making of the song. Yet, this was an era of creative freedom and unprecedented experimentation, and no one, not even the band, knew where their next step would take them. The stage was set for a song that would break conventional norms, even if it seemed impossible at the time. In the midst of their ambitious creative efforts, the song in question was initially born from two separate ideas that John Lennon and Paul McCartney were working on. John had written the first part of the song, a dark, reflective piece about life and death, while Paul had his own entirely different melody, focusing on a more upbeat, whimsical tune. These two ideas were at odds with each other, and it wasn't immediately clear how they could come together. The concept of blending these two musical ideas seemed unconventional to everyone involved. The sound, the lyrics, the structure, all of it felt fragmented, pieced together from different worlds. Lennon's portion was introspective and melancholic, while McCartney's was light-hearted and playful. In theory, the two should never work together. But, as was often the case with the Beatles, the tension between the two parts would ultimately create something unique. Producer George Martin played a key role in transforming what seemed like a disjointed mess into a cohesive whole. His expertise in orchestration and studio techniques allowed him to bring the disparate elements together. However, not everyone was convinced. The complexity of the song, both musically and lyrically, made the final product seem impossible to achieve. The band's own doubts lingered as they began recording it, unsure of whether it would even make it past the studio phase. The studio was where the true challenges of this song came to the forefront. The Beatles were known for pushing the limits of what could be done with the recording equipment available at the time, and this song was no exception. To achieve the unique sound that was intended, the band had to rely on cutting-edge recording techniques, some of which were experimental. One of the primary technical obstacles was the track's complex structure. The song wasn't a simple verse-chorus affair. It had multiple sections that didn't necessarily follow traditional song formats. The transition from Lennon's somber verses to McCartney's upbeat section required intricate editing and the use of multi-track recording. The studio engineers had to blend different musical sections and overdub them with a variety of sounds, including unconventional instruments such as an orchestra. One of the most innovative aspects of the recording process was the use of tape loops and backwards tape effects. George Martin and the Beatles experimented with these effects to create a surreal, otherworldly soundscape that added to the song's complexity. However, these techniques were still relatively new, and the band had never attempted such an ambitious project before. There were moments when the band members doubted whether they could pull it off, but the studio experimentation, combined with Martin's guidance, helped push the song into the realm of possibility. The process of recording this song was not without its setbacks, and as with many great works, there was a myth that grew around it. The idea that it was recorded flawlessly in one go, that it was somehow inevitable. In reality, this was far from the truth. The song was a product of trial and error, with multiple takes and countless hours spent in the studio, adjusting, tweaking, and reworking it. John Lennon, in particular, was often unsatisfied with the initial takes. He would frequently ask for changes or suggest new ideas, adding to the already complex recording process. The band's perfectionism would create a sense of frustration as they continually sought to reach a sound that didn't quite exist yet. Despite the struggles, it became clear that the song had the potential to be something monumental. However, it took time for the band to fully embrace the final product. The myth of perfection also ties into the perception that the Beatles were untouchable, that they could do no wrong. This song, however, was a far cry from perfect in the traditional sense. It was a messy, disjointed creation that transcended conventional song structures. But it was exactly this imperfection, this willingness to break boundaries, that made the track so iconic. It wasn't a perfect creation in the eyes of the band or their critics, but it was something far more important. It was unique. The creation of this song also highlighted the creative tensions that existed within the Beatles. By 1967, the band's members were starting to diverge musically. John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr all had different visions for the band's future. While McCartney often pushed for tighter, more polished pop songs, Lennon gravitated toward more experimental, avant-garde ideas. Harrison, meanwhile, was beginning to explore Eastern influences and more introspective material. These differences often led to creative friction, and during the making of this song, those tensions were palpable. The collaboration on this track, which involved two separate pieces being merged together, forced the band members to compromise and meet each other halfway. There was a struggle to maintain unity, but at the same time, this friction was essential in producing the track's signature sound. Despite the friction, the band knew that the song had to be completed in a way that would satisfy each member's individual vision. McCartney's whimsical section balanced out Lennon's somber tone, and both pieces of the song were integrated in a way that honored each member's unique contribution. The fact that they were able to overcome their creative differences during such an ambitious project marked a turning point for the band, showing their ability to innovate despite the tensions that were growing within. When the song was finally released, it wasn't just a piece of music. It was a cultural revolution. At a time when music was rapidly evolving, the Beatles had once again set a new benchmark. The song, with its unconventional structure, groundbreaking recording techniques, and raw emotional depth, resonated with a generation that was seeking new ways to express themselves. The impact of the song was felt not just within the music industry, but also across popular culture. The innovative use of studio techniques influenced generations of musicians who would follow, especially in the realm of progressive rock and experimental pop. Additionally, the song's lyrical themes spoke to a generation facing social and political upheaval, offering a blend of introspection and hope. In many ways, the song marked the end of one era of the Beatles and the beginning of another. It signaled a move toward more complex conceptual albums that would define the latter part of their career. Its release signified the band's ability to transcend the typical pop song format and create something that would continue to inspire and challenge listeners for decades to come. The song was also embraced by critics and fans alike, securing the Beatles' place as the foremost innovators in popular music. It wasn't just another hit. It was a piece of art that pushed boundaries and transformed the musical landscape. Today, the song remains one of the Beatles' most celebrated tracks, not just for its musical innovation, but also for its ability to capture the cultural and emotional climate of its time. Over the years, the song has been dissected, analyzed, and celebrated by critics and musicians alike. Its influence can be traced through countless genres, from indie rock to electronic music. In terms of its technical aspects, the song pushed the boundaries of what was possible in the studio. The multi-layered production, intricate arrangements, and experimental use of sound became a model for future generations of artists who sought to achieve a similar blend of complexity and beauty. Furthermore, the song's emotional depth resonated with listeners across generations, speaking to universal themes of love, loss, and human connection. The cultural impact of the song cannot be overstated. It was more than just a song. It became a symbol of the Beatles' ability to push creative boundaries and redefine what music could be. It was a marker of their place in history, as they set the standard for not only rock music, but for popular music as a whole. Even decades after its release, the song continues to influence new generations of artists and listeners. Its legacy endures as a testament to the power of creativity, collaboration, and the refusal to settle for the ordinary. One of the most persistent myths surrounding this song is that it was an effortless creation, that the Beatles simply walked into the studio and produced a masterpiece. In reality, the recording process was long, arduous, and filled with moments of doubt. The band was often at odds with each other about the direction of the track, and there were times when it seemed like the song might never come together. For instance, Lennon was initially uncertain about McCartney's section of the song, feeling that it clashed with the mood he had set with his own writing. There were multiple takes and revisions, with each band member contributing their own ideas and suggestions. The song that finally emerged was a product of countless hours spent in the studio, fine-tuning every detail. Despite this, the final version of the song captured the essence of the Beatles, a blend of experimentation, spontaneity, and genius. The band was never afraid to take risks, and this song was a prime example of their willingness to embrace the unknown. The final product was not a flawless piece of music. It was a carefully constructed mess, a beautiful cacophony that represented the band at the height of their creative powers. In the end, This song became the perfect embodiment of the Beatles' philosophy. Music was about experimentation, breaking rules, and pushing boundaries. This was a song that many thought was impossible to create, but the Beatles did it anyway. They took risks, blended genres, and used every tool at their disposal to craft something that had never been heard before. The song not only represented the band's musical innovation, but also encapsulated their willingness to take artistic chances. It was a reflection of the tumultuous times in which it was created, speaking to a generation that was searching for new ways to express themselves. The true legacy of the song is not just in its technical achievements, but in its ability to challenge both the music industry and its listeners. It served as a reminder that creativity has no limits, and that sometimes the most impossible ideas are the ones that end up changing the world. Through this song, the Beatles proved that the impossible is often just the beginning of something extraordinary.